Okay. So first, what is an API? An API is an application programming interface. There are really two primary types of APIs. We'll go into this a little bit more deeply later in the presentation. There's a REST or RESTful API, which is the more current web-based format. And there's also SOAP, which is a more traditional format, requires more bandwidth and is slightly more secure, but more difficult to work with. When you're talking about an API, there's really four functions that it's performing. It's either getting information or retrieving information from an application for another application. It's putting information, replacing existing data related to a specific resource, or it's posting net new information into a database. And then finally, it can delete information if there's information in there that's redundant or repetitive or outdated. So why is this important? In the past, we had a couple of applications we were working with, but in today's world, that's really changed. The cloud and software applications as a service has created an environment where we're dealing with, maybe not 2 or 3 applications, but an organization might be dealing with 100, 200, even 300 different applications. And because of that, it creates a lot of complexity for users to be able to go in and operate amongst all of these different systems and solutions. So some examples of that effect. The average employee is using 8 different applications across all different industries and sizes. The number of apps per company are numbering in the hundreds as you go above 250 users, and even 40 for small businesses. Various applications they need to manage, curate, take care of the data, and continue to operate. Employees work with common data, but often it's in disparate applications and systems and environments, making it redundant and complicated for things to stay up to date. And business adoption is generally being driven at the department level. So it promises powerful simplicity, and it actually delivers on that. But when we start having silos within the business of information, it means not everyone has that availability to understand the bigger and broader picture. The spread of application creates many touch points for information gathering and analytics, so it makes it difficult as a manager or a leader within an organization to see the true picture of what's happening when you have so many different applications that you need to take into account. And obviously, lagging information is a huge issue amongst many organizations where the data might be different amongst these different systems. And when that happens, it leads to customer complaints, it leads to lack of innovation, and it slows down your team and your processes. And lastly, but also very important, is security. By granting people broad access across a variety of applications, it creates more exposure for your organization because they're in areas they don't need to be in order just to view information or get content that is specific to their role. If there's a way to give them that information in the applications they already use today, that is best practice and best way to approach this. So from here, that was just a quick introduction to what APIs are. I want to go ahead and pass this off to Jeremy Ness, our CTO. Jeremy writes a lot of the APIs here at Matrix Networks and for our clients, has been programming for many, many years, and is very familiar with the varieties of APIs that are available and how they're used in market. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to pass off to Mr. Jeremy Ness.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So I do want to start this presentation. This will be a little more of a kind of technical deep dive. Often when people talk about APIs, we all know that they help integrate different platforms, different products, enable functionality, but really what are they, right? Everybody kind of talks to them in a very ephemeral way. So I kind of want to get under the covers and talk about really what they are, talk about the tools that we use here at Matrix to help integrate different APIs, the internal integrations we have done, and then really kind of go deep on one specific integration we've done that enables our MCAS kind of SD-WAN platform. So as Cal mentioned, there's kind of two kind of overarching architectures of APIs. Really, at the end of the day, they seek to achieve the same thing, right? Have a programmatic way to interface with an application. So again, you kind of mentioned SOAP and REST. SOAP is kind of the first on the scene, developed by Microsoft. SOAP really uses one data format being XML, or extensible markup language, in terms of that kind of data format that gets transferred. Along with that, XML is kind of a big nested format. You really kind of have to parse it to get information out of it. But normally companies that as a schema, really a map or a dictionary of how to even read that XML. Along with that, XML is considered, or SOAP's a very strongly typed format, being even within that schema, you have to say, this is a string, this is an integer, this is a floating point, et cetera. So with that comes a kind of a lot of overhead, but with it, it's a lot of power, right? If you want a very defined, very strong, API, SOAP really brings that to the table. SOAP can be used across a web server HTTP interface, but it's not limited to that. Even inner applications can use it. Again, if you really want a strongly typed, strongly secured, there's a bunch of security extensions. SOAP probably makes a lot of sense, right? I'm thinking if I'm in the banking industry or some other formats to where all of that overhead brings a lot of stability, awesome. But as the web kind of started coming out, JavaScripts and the need for front-end web pages to interact with back-end systems, XML and SOAP just became a little tedious, maybe caused more overhead than was necessary. So REST came out on the scene. And again, it really kind of started with that whole JavaScript, right? We had the Web 2.0 and web pages that were dynamic and that capability to have front end, the website, your browser interact with at the back end. So again, REST is strictly an HTTP or HTTPS kind of interface. It can use all kinds of data formats. It can use XML if needed. It can use YAML, the very appropriately named yet another markup language. But by far, JSON is kind of the dominant data transfer piece on REST. So which for the rest of this presentation, when I refer to APIs, I'm going to strictly be talking about REST. It's just important to know those. If you talk to a vendor like, oh yeah, we have an API, oftentimes everyone's going to be assuming some kind of REST or RESTful API. All of a sudden, hey, yeah, we have the SOAP interface, which might come as a surprise to a lot of web developers. So again, something just to be aware of. Next is API documentations. Whenever we're looking at the capabilities of any products that we work with, I always go straight to the documentation, right? Everybody kind of implements their APIs in a different way, right? So in the API documentation, there's a notion of an endpoint. So that's really what's going to be exposed by the API that allows you to query it, right? So if I'm going to take RingCentral as an example, you kind of have some overarching voice, messaging, meetings in terms of groups, and you drill down and you'll see an endpoint for the voice will allow me to call out, or an API that will let me transfer a call, right? Those will be the endpoints that are exposed. So again, because everybody's different, that's kind of always where we start. Another thing that is different across all of these vendors is how do you access or authenticate to the APIs, right? Obviously, a lot of sensitive material is generally exposed via the API, so how do we secure that? Here again, we find that everybody does it differently. Kind of the simplest format is going to be a single API key. So if you guys have ever generated keys before, you've gone in, hit the button, it's probably generated a whole big string of gibberish, hopefully, letters, numbers, etc. But even how you present that to the API can be completely different across API vendors. Do you put it in a HTTP header, or is it part of a GET string? Which again, the documentation is really going to lead you what the appropriate way to present that to the API is. Addition to the key, you might have credentials. So some APIs will actually use credentials for your account or another account. Oftentimes you base64 encode these and again, present them from a header. Sometimes it's the credentials and a key. So again, completely different. One thing that I do want to touch on is oftentimes if we're working with APIs exposed by a SaaS or some kind of as a service platform, we're in a multi-tenanted environment, right? So again, the keys kind of give us access to just our data. Oftentimes you can scope keys, right? So just kind of like our domain administrator account, right? Not everybody should be able to access everything all the time, especially, should they have full control, read only? Should they only access a subset of information? I'll talk on later in this presentation, but we use Zenefits for an HR platform. Of course, a lot of sensitive information there. We did build an API integration, so we scoped that key down to some very specific data. That way, if that key ever walked away from us, we would be really limiting the exposure of that data. Next is get and post. As Kyle mentioned, there's a bunch of methods. I've already touched on REST is generally going to be an HTTP environment. So already have a bunch of methods, right? However, get and post are going to be by far the most common. An HTTP GET query, of course, is what we do when we're browsing the web all day. In the vFairs site we're on right now, on the Matrix webpage, your browser is doing an HTTP GET, right? It's like, hey, give me some information. To where if you fill out a form on our webpage, you probably signed up for this awesome event. When you sign out that form, you hit submit, and your browser posted information. So again, the documentation is really going to tell you, hey, this endpoint supports a post or a GET. And often an endpoint can support both, but obviously it'll act in a different way depending if we're doing a GET or a post. So that's really us interacting with an API, getting information. What if we want an API to send information to us? So this is the notion of a webhook or a callback. Those are really interchangeable terms. So an example for this is, say we have a cloud contact center and we want to do that screen pop, right? We always say, hey, we want to see this 10-digit number coming in and do a screen pop. What that is a oftentimes your CRM that you want to do a screen pop in will have an exposed webhook. So when a call comes into the contact center, it'll then send, hey, this agent has, like, oh, I know who that agent is, and oh, I'm going to pop the record for that 10-digit number, right? So again, that's one API being that contact center sending to another. Another webhook you're probably familiar with, if we have any Slack Teams users and we have any integrations, so where an external application, something happens and posts into, again, your Slack channel, your Teams channel, be it like an incoming webhook that, again, those services have exposed that we can then, post into. So again, there's kind of a notion here of hey, I'm going to go out to an API and get something. I want the API to send something to me. As I mentioned, there's several data formats for REST, but by far most common is JSON or that JavaScript object notation. JSON is just a text-based. It's not encoded, it's human readable. Obviously, you'll see JavaScript there. Yes, this was born out of JavaScript, but you don't have to have JavaScript in terms of a language to use JSON. Virtually every language on the planet at this point has some library or module that you can import into your program to enable these HTTP gets and posts and patches and deletes and puts and whatever methods you need, but also be able to decode that JSON and put it into our language of choice. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a visual person, so I kind of made a very quick JSON example of what the tech mixer might look like expressed in JSON. So again, this is an object, right? So first you'll notice the curly braces top and bottom. This is our object. JSON, as I mentioned, is text readable, but it's really a key value pair data format. So here we can see the top line, a key named name, and the value called tech mixer. We have a date key, today's date, so on and so forth. So you can imagine if you're working in your program, you're going to make a JSON request, you're going to get some object back. You'll say, hey, object.name, what are you? Oh, you're the tech mixer. Object.url, what's the URL? So on and so forth, description. Agenda in us looks a little bit different. We have some square brackets with some more objects inside. So this is an array. So you can imagine, hey, here's an array of the agenda. I'm going to loop over the array. So I'm going to pull out the first object, which is array element 0 because computers count funny. But say, hey, first object here, what's, the dot time, key? Oh, that's 9 o'clock. The event keynote, and then obviously the host. So I hope you guys got a chance to see that. Leah was awesome. And obviously here we are now on the next agenda item. So again, this is kind of an example of, these different APIs are sending information back and forth. It's always going to follow more or less this type of format to where we have the name value pairs, arrays, nested objects. So this is a little bit of a personal slide in terms of the development environment that I use and most of us at Matrix use to build the integrations, which I'll touch on the next slide. So as far as languages, again, there's kind of this notion I have of scripting and creating an API or an application, right? Scripting being, I'm just going to go out to an API to where an API or application I make, maybe I want to receive a webhook. Maybe I'm building a full-blown application that's going to have that front-end JavaScript communicating with the back-end API. So you'll see the two languages that I prefer to write in are Python and Node.js. These are very different languages, with Python being Python, with Node.js having JavaScript in terms of a backend language, right? So depending on the size and the complexity, and if I need to interact with databases, and again, there's a bunch of different use cases, right? So again, Python has the request library. So that's the library that makes those HTTP gets and posts for me, and then can hand me back a JSON object, which it then parses into a Python dictionary. That's kind of the native JSON format inside Python is called a dictionary, being like key value pairs. Then obviously Node.js has the requests library. For those who ever programmed, I did do the request promise because we're in an asynchronous environment and we get to play in promise hell, which no one has ever done asynchronous with promises. It's a whole thing, but the great thing about it, it's non-blocking. And then again, APIs. If I'm going to be standing up an API for someone else to query, again, two use cases here, Python with Flask. If we have any Django fans in the group here, yes, I use Flask, don't blame me. Then again, the Express framework and Node. So again, those are the languages that we write most of our scripts here and applications at Matrix. Then the tools, kind of the main tool I start with is Postman. So Postman is a desktop application that makes it easy to kind of simulate these gets and posts. So as I mentioned before, the first step I'm going to do if ever exploring a new API, I'm going to go look at the documentation. And then I can take those API endpoints and the keys described, put them in Postman before I even start programming and query these APIs, right? So just Postman makes it very easy to do these gets and posts. More importantly, a lot of API documentation will have a Postman collection. So it actually lets you import all these endpoints, so I don't have to copy and paste them from the documentation and put them in Postman. It'll automatically know my gets and my posts, and oftentimes there's if you're sending a body. So again, a great even start poking at things. If you're not a developer, that's okay. Just hey, what does this even look like? What does this JSON back and forth look like? Next is the editor that I write my code. I've used probably everything under the sun, all the way down to Notepad++. Don't do it, it's a bad idea. To add them from GitHub and so on and so forth. But I've really kind of settled on Visual Studio Code as my main editor. That is a free editor from Microsoft. The main reason I love it is the environment I get to program in. So like most people here, I am sitting in front of a Windows 10 desktop. That is my main business machine. However, most of the scripts and apps that I write in a production environment sit on a Linux server. So if nobody's heard, you're missing out. Linux is finally a first-class citizen in Windows. In the latest 2004, not confusing, Windows update, Windows subsystem for Linux 2 was released. So there's a full-blown Linux kernel that you can enable on your machine, download your favorite distro. I find myself working in Ubuntu and Debian most of the time, but Visual Studio Code can actually hook into that environment. So I'm natively used to my apt-get, my pip installs, and my npm install. And again, I can develop in a full Linux environment while comfortably sitting on my Windows 10 workstation. And then again, once I'm ready for production, I can then move that code over into a production environment. Obviously, if we have any Mac OS people in the crowd, you're already sitting in front of a BSD or a Unix-based machine. So you guys can skip that step because you already have a lot of those tools at your disposal. All right, so onto the integrations that we have built at Matrix. So as Kyle mentioned, I mean, the amount of software and systems we have is just growing more and more and more, especially as we go more SaaS. A lot of times we'll have different information in different systems, and it'll be confusing for our employees, our coworkers, and our clients, right? Where do I find that? What's the most up to date? You can put duplicate information. So we migrated to ConnectWise about a year ago. Our old kind of ticket management, client management platform had no APIs, so we had no way to interact with it in a programmatic way. So with ConnectWise, we really designate as our source of truth. All information shall always be in ConnectWise, and you shall always, wherever humanly possible, take that information and sync it to outside sources. Or if you do generate information outside sources, it needs to be synced into ConnectWise. So you'll see really most of our integrations are built out of ConnectWise being that single source of truth. And then as an internal communications tool, we've settled on Teams. The only reason that's important in this context is most of the scripts we write will send notifications into Teams. However, this can really be any platform, right? We have of course, our Slack or Telegram or Discord, or of course, RingCentral has an amazing communication platform tool that, yes, can take incoming webhooks, right? So that just happens to be what Matrix has settled on. So now of actual examples of integrations we've written. After our support was one of the kind of the first ones that we tackled. So in our support, any Matrix client, hey, I'm having a hard time, I need help, it might be after hours, You call in, you hit auto attendant, you hit 5 or whatever it was, and we take you through kind of that traditional voicemail interview box, right? Leave your name, beep, leave your number, beep, leave your issue, beep. All right, we're gonna send this on to a tech, and a tech will contact you back as soon as possible. Well, if you're like in an emergency, I'm not sure if this is making you feel really good. Luckily, our techs did have an awesome record of getting back in a timely fashion, but we really wanted to improve that experience. On top of that, for our technicians, it wasn't a great experience, right? They had some work group list and notifications where you leave a voicemail and I'd call the next person. Every time I'm on call, I'm going in and changing, who's getting that voicemail. And then additionally, operations and management had really zero insight. How many people are calling? How long is it taking for our techs to get back? How often does this escalate to the next technician? And our technician's not picking this up. So we're just blind to a whole lot of this information. So we went and utilized the CPaaS platform, a communication platform as a service, because we need more acronyms as a service. We settled on Twilio in conjunction with Smartsheet. So now when you call our on-call, it actually forwards to Twilio. Twilio has kind of a full voice response. It's where we did set up a Node.js application to go back and forth with Twilio. With that, we kind of have that same interview, but now we have text-to-speech, which is awesome. It knows the 10-digit you're calling from. So once you kind of go through that whole interview piece, our application reaches out to Smartsheet. For those not aware, Smartsheet is kind of an Excel or Google Sheets-based system, but it's extremely API rich. So it's very easy for us to programmatically do a HTTP get who's on call, and then escalate to that person. Another awesome thing we're able to do with Twilio was once you go through the interview, you have the option, do I want to leave a voicemail or do I want to stay on the line? Regardless of either of those, whoever is on call gets a quick call that just says, hey, somebody's on call. This is the, hey, wake up, right? Somebody's on call. Additionally, we're going to text that person all the text-to-speech we got. So that text-to-speech of, caller, issue, their 10-digit. There's an acknowledge link and a link to the recording. So again, they can kind of wake up, they see who it is, oh, okay, they can acknowledge it. If that person held on the line, they'll just ring through. Otherwise, they'll acknowledge it, and that will stop the escalation to the next tech, and then it's on the tech to call that person back. Once that's acknowledged, we do log that into Smartsheet, another Smartsheet. So now we have our log that we've always kind of been missing. And we open a ticket in ConnectWise with all the information we already gathered. So as soon as the tech gets up, calls them back, there's already a ticket sitting in the CRM for them to put their time to, for them to, again, just kind of cut that time out of, putting in duplicate information. Then additionally, I'll touch on our PRTG integration, which will be used for our MCAS or our dual circuit SD-WAN, which also hooks straight into this. So if a site goes down in the middle of the night, we go through the same call flow. We call the tech, we text the tech, we go through the same, we open a ticket for the tech already. So this really improved the quality of life for our technicians, and it really improved our ability to support our clients in a more timely fashion. Next one's kind of a cute little example, but I think it's very applicable. Here at Matrix, we do acknowledge people's anniversaries and birthdays. So when we would onboard new employees, we'd have to give this information to the network administrator. He'd put it in Active Directory. Then we had some crusty script that would hit Active Directory every day in a scheduled task and then send out an email. So it's this email is the dreaded all personnel email, right? So we're junking up people's inboxes. People would hit reply all, potentially inappropriate information gets sent to everybody. It just wasn't the best it could be. So we were kind of looking around and realized, oh, all this information lives in benefits. Again, we use for our HR and benefits. So now we just have a script that queries benefits every day. And hey, do we have a birthday or an anniversary? If we do, then we then post to an all personnel Teams channel. So which does kind of devolve into a GIF thread, but everybody enjoys it. And it's just so much better than that all personnel email. Another example we had was this platform we're on for TM8 is called vFairs. So Ryan Graven, the amazing vice president we have that put on normally our physical events, but now our virtual event, was sending out lovely emails to everybody. You guys should have probably all got emails that said how amazing Tech Mixer 8 is going to be, and you should sign up. But once you signed up, you probably don't want more emails telling you to sign up. So what Ryan was doing several times a day was going to vFairs, downloading a list, taking that and uploading a HubSpot, which we use for our email campaign. So he's like, hey, Jeremy, can we do some automation thing here? I'm like, I don't know, Ryan, does vFairs have an API? Yes, it does. Took me maybe 20 minutes at most. Did a quick script, pulled down all the email addresses from vFairs, put it in HubSpot. You guys are welcome. You did not get badgered for more emails to sign up to this event after you did sign up. Again, due to just a really quick Python script I threw together very quickly. The last integration I want to touch on is probably our most important, which I think really sets us apart, especially for our MCAS product. And that is provisioning and monitoring of our SD-WAN solution. So with that, we need to be able to monitor circuit health, circuit up, down, site up, down. Again, we use PRTG. Anybody familiar? It's kind of your traditional, typically SNMP based or paying or ICMP based monitoring tool. That doesn't cut it for SD-WAN since we have overlays and underlays and we have multiple circuits, and typically there's obfuscations of the circuit for that. So as I mentioned, this is kind of our largest kind of customization. So starting with this is our source of truth. As soon as we onboard an MCAS client, of course, we generate an invoice, right? So once we generate an invoice, we have a script that automatically goes and creates a folder structure in PRTG. That folder structure is company name, and then if you have multiple sites, each site gets a folder. At this point, they're just folders sitting there in PRTG though. But that does kick off a message to another Teams channel. It says, hey, we just look like we onboarded a new client. There's some folders sitting there. Once the SD-WAN appliances get provisioned, we need to then enter that SD-WAN information into source of truth, ConnectWise, right? So every SD-WAN provider has serial numbers or IDs or whatever. So that is a manual process for us to go grab those from those disparate sources and enter them in our source of truth. Once those are entered, the script automatically creates sensors in PRTG. But again, not all SD-WANs are alike, right? We can't monitor them. We can't say, here's an SNMP key, or here's an IP address to ping. So here we wrote another custom node application that exposes APIs to PRTG. PRTG does have a sensor that can query REST APIs and get JSON back and parse that. But it wants this JSON return in a very specific format. So most SD-WAN providers are awesome in terms of SD-WAN being controller-based, and that controller exposes APIs that have the health of the circuit. But again, I can't just point PRTG at those. It has no idea how to parse it. It doesn't care about the IP addresses or the carriers or anything like that, right? So you can kind of write this middleware. So PRTG will query the middleware. The middleware will then turn around and query the different integrations we built, right? So it'll query BigLeaf. BigLeaf returns a whole bunch of information, but most importantly, BigLeaf rates their health on a 0 to 7, 0 being everything's great, 7 site down. We then massage that and return that to PRTG in a format it wants to see. Meraki, we return the packet loss. VeloCloud gives us enough information. We real-time compute the MOS score, right? Nothing really is going to tell the health of the circuit except mashing together the latency jitter and packet loss together into this MOS score. So then as a little gray kind of shows up to the side, if there's errors anywhere in here, again, we post to Teams, right? We kind of have a dev channel that, hey, if anything goes bump in the dark, we're not failing silently. We're not failing this to a log that nobody's going to see, right? We need to surface this information straight to our team. So once those get responded back to the sensors, then we then have thresholds on those sensors, right? So again, the great thing about SD-WAN is we get all this health information. It's not a typical up-down, or hey, the latency got really high, or hey, the packet loss, right? It's where you kind of just don't get the whole picture. So again, based on the different types of information, different sensors, we have thresholds. So the thresholds typically are a circuit is dirty, circuit is down, site is down. So if a site is down, we go through that kind of on-call workflow that I already described. For all alerts being in warnings or system down, we open a ticket in ConnectWise. Again, PRTG knows about the company, it knows about the site, and it knows about the severity. So we open a ticket under the right site with the correct severity, which then kicks off SLAs in our systems. That's how we keep ourselves accountable for contacting the carrier or working with our clients to try and resolve this issue, right? So again, that was another kind of little custom middleware to where PRTG sends a post, but it can't post right into ConnectWise because ConnectWise does not have any concept of how to handle that information. So here end to end, we have a very robust monitoring system that we don't touch. We don't touch PRTG, right? Everything automatically gets provisioned, endpoints are automatically done, notification thresholds are all automatically done. So again, we're able to build this whole additional system, which typically you're kind of living in multiple spots. all into one. So again, that's just a small example of what we've done here at Matrix to really take advantage of just the proliferation of APIs. And I hope you guys have taken away from this that there's probably a lot of automation you can do in your environment to try and streamline things, make things better for your coworkers and clients. So with that said, I would like to pass this off to Mike, the man over at RingCentral that knows all about APIs.
Jeremy, thank you so much. And a big thank you to both you and Kyle for inviting us here today. We're very excited to be part of this amazing presentation here and this amazing event. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. You know, what Kyle was saying about APIs and what Jeremy is saying about APIs, you really cannot be said enough. In a past life, my job was essentially to work with companies and help them, you know, move to using APIs or API first technology. And companies really chose APIs either because they wanted to improve efficiency. You mentioned, you know, automating the notifications into Microsoft Teams when new members are onboarded versus those emails, or you know, saving, you know, Kyle and Ryan from having to go in and upload that list to HubSpot, you know, every day, multiple times a day. They do it for a competitive advantage. You know, they want to offer a better solution or better service to their customers, or they do it really just to try to future-proof their business so that when things happen, they're able to adapt quickly and you know, stay agile. And we talk about digital transformation, and both of you did such a great job bringing this up. You know, we always like to, you know, the quote things like, you know, the world's largest taxi service has no cars or has no taxis. You know, of course, with Uber, you know, the world's largest hotel chain owns no hotels, of course, with Airbnb. You know, just how the industries are quickly transformed sometimes overnight. And that's really the power of APIs that both of you are alluding to. And what's interesting is we've not quite adapted that power with communications. And we have a huge opportunity as we look at digital transformation and APIs to really revolutionize communications and the way we communicate. Now, with that said, obviously at RingCentral, we like APIs. This is, you know, of course, a shameless plug. We try very hard to provide strong APIs for our customers. And we really believe that APIs are, you know, really necessary or critical to allowing our customers to adopt the platform and fully be successful. Again, it's one thing to be able to have a phone to make phone calls. It's a completely different thing to be able to automate, you know, your voicemails to go to different team members, or to use artificial intelligence to understand what people are calling about, or the importance or prioritization of voicemails. And we look at the industry today, and Jeremy, you did a great job highlighting this. You really have two different groups out there. I like to say there's three groups, but we'll start with two groups. And that is, you have your UCaaS or your contact center providers, and you have your CPaaS providers. You can go to a UCaaS provider and you can get your all-in-one business solution, you know, as Jeremy and Kyle mentioned. But then when you want to do more of the kind of build it yourself, I want to get the information, have them call in, and then direct it and manage it all through code, you go to a CPaaS provider. You and Jeremy mentioned Twilio, which is an absolutely fantastic company. The problem with this is neither of these communications really play nicely together. So you're either trying to build something with the CPaaS provider that's billing you and then try to make it work with your UCaaS provider who's billing you, and the data doesn't connect together. The technologies don't work together unless you have a company like Matrix, which really builds that middle ground for you and makes those two connect. And of course, Matrix does a fantastic job with that. And that's what I like to say that, you know, RingCentral tries to be a little bit different, is that we want to offer you the full UCaaS platform, the full contact center platform, but also the APIs. So when Jeremy mentioned the ability to call in for that voicemail and then dig into that recording, dig into that data, prioritize it, understand what people are calling about, send it to different team members, or the person who calls in and is on your IVR and has the choice of whether to get a call back or to stay on hold. You'll be able to do that with a single platform, a single number, your business number. Same thing with text messages, promotional messages, etc. So again, we look at APIs and what they're doing with the industry. I literally cannot agree with Jeremy and Kyle more emphatically that, you know, APIs really are the future of communications and what's going to drive a business, allow a business, again, that competitive advantage or the ability to innovate for their customers or be more efficient for their company or really future-proof themselves. So, you know, with RingCentral, we really try to provide a unified communications platform and a service. We don't want you to have to choose between one or the other. But I want to jump back in time a little bit. And you know, Jeremy and Kyle both brought up REST. technology can be hard to adapt sometimes. It can be slow to adapt or for us to grab onto it. You know, we talk about REST. Fielding's dissertation of REST was written back in 2000. Here we are 20 years later, and now REST is finally, you know, the predominant API type. By the way, if you want a sense of humor or something funny about that, Fielding actually went to his professor and said, "I'm not ready to turn it in yet. It's not done." His professor said, "Don't worry, no one's ever going to read it." And of course, now is the #1 type of communication through APIs. But even going back further, in 1876, the phone was invented. And I want you to think about 1876 and how people had to communicate. You had to go to a local bar or salon. You'd have to wait in line for 30 minutes. You get on the phone, you'd have this horrible, horrible connection. And you'd finally be like, Ma, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Just not a great way to communicate. The reality is we still make a lot of people communicate that way today. You dial a business number, you're on hold for 30 minutes, someone answers, it's the wrong department, you get transferred. You're on hold another 15 minutes, they finally answer right as you're driving through the tunnel, it's a terrible connection, and you're both saying, can you hear me now? So we have to look at communication, understand how can we improve communication, how can we revolutionize communication, and how can technologies like VoIP and APIs allow us to do that. By the way, if you're thinking, man, the phone is old, the fax machine was invented 33 years prior. Thankfully, with fax machines or facsimiles, they're now no longer really used in mission critical industries. They're only used in industries like fintech or healthcare or legal, things we don't rely on every day, especially not in a pandemic. So if you're relying on these technologies, how can you, again, use APIs and technology to improve? And that's what a lot of companies have done with RingCentral's platform and other platforms. Jeremy gave several great use cases of using APIs to create a more efficient environment. We have customers that use our APIs to really try to create a more efficient experience for their customers. And that experience is more critical than ever now. 55% of customers are going to opt out of your communications if they're not convenient for them. That means that email list, I'll pick on Jeremy, I used to work for an email company, people opt out of those emails, even though they're important emails and communications you want them to have. And then there's the millennials. We're going to pick on millennials for a second here. Millennials actually view your service based on how convenient it is to contact you and how quickly problems get resolved. You can have great products, but if something goes wrong and they can't get resolved quickly, they're going to judge your company for that. So time to resolution is absolutely huge. In fact, 60% of people will look at your company in a more positive light if you offer texting as a customer service channel. But how do you manage texting? How do you manage phone? How do you manage these different services? Again, great use cases. We have customers that are using artificial intelligence. And by the way, RingCentral provides an open source AI project for voicemail where people can call in. It will prioritize your voicemails. It will categorize your voicemails. It will tell you what the voicemail is about, and you can jump into anywhere in that voicemail and see exactly what they are saying text by text and in speech. Same thing with meetings. Compliance, another huge area people are focused on. How do you ensure that your applications are compliant and that your team members are compliant, especially work in healthcare or fintech or any of those, again, heavily regulated industries? Using services like Gong or Theta Lake to actually go in and evaluate how effective your communications are and if they're compliant and raise red flags. Again, things you're able to do with APIs. One of the most amazing use cases, though, that I absolutely love is 24-hour teas. And 24-hour Tees is a small t-shirt company. They have 6 employees, but they want to compete with the largest t-shirt companies in the world. So what they did was they built an SMS chatbot. Now, the great thing, again, about having an all-in-one solution is that when you text them, the chatbot can handle the text. And if the chatbot can't, it still goes to a customer service rep who can handle that text for them. And the entire communication is there in front of the customer service rep. But with 24-hour Tees, let's say you want to order or reorder t-shirts. You had to order 50 and you needed 25 more. It's as simple as texting their business number, hey, can you send me 25 more of this order? And just like that, it automatically goes into their ordering system, it automatically goes into production, it goes to the designer, and they take care of it. Proofs, another challenge with a t-shirt company is you send the design, they have to make a proof to make sure it works for you. Well, with them, they send you the notification via email, but again, we all know that email is not always the most effective means. They also send you a message via SMS. You can click the link, look at the proof right in your from your phone, and text back, approved. Just like that, very simple. Even more amazing is the customer support aspects. You can call in from that same number, or if it's 11 o'clock at night and you're thinking, man, my t-shirts haven't arrived, I wonder where they are, you can text, where are my t-shirts? Again, using their chatbot, which is tied to the SMS, it'll actually check their ordering system, find your order, get the tracking number, check with the tracking provider, whether it's FedEx or UPS, to tell you, you know what, your order actually shipped on Wednesday. It's currently in Texas. It should arrive in San Francisco on Thursday. Again, just a very simple use case that they built very quickly. And Chase Meyer, the owner of 24-Hour Tees, you basically said, he goes, I'm not even a developer. I use basically different tools to help me build this. And again, that's the power of APIs to integrate with your services. And again, anything from compliance, anything from making life easier for your employees by building it into tools like Outlook or your CRM to really improving the customer experience. And that's where we really were in 2019. We saw a lot of customers that were using this technologies really to try to create new experiences, really to try to be more efficient, to reduce a lot of the redundant manual workload. In the case of 24-Hour Tees, that saved them a lot of money, a lot of time from having to go through and review each order and review each text message. Instead, they were able to provide 24-hour support while maintaining a tight budget, which turned out to be really, really important to them as we went into COVID-19. Really important to everybody as we go into the era of COVID-19. So again, innovation, competitive advantage, being more efficient, but APIs are also about future proofing. And really went from 2019 where APIs were, these are nice to have, these are great, these offer a lot of advantages, to here we are in 2020, where the ability to really future-proof your communications and drive innovations has gone from a nice to have to an absolute critical must. Now, hopefully we don't have any dragons or dinosaurs or meteors attacking us this year. The way the year's going, we don't know. But this has basically changed the industry overnight. If you think how you were communicating before February to how you're communicating in March, almost overnight, everything we did changed. Instead of going to the doctor, you had to adapt telehealth. Now, the weird thing is, well, some people had telehealth. A lot of hospitals, a lot of care providers hadn't yet set up video meetings or telehealth services. Overnight, hospitals and healthcare providers were required to build out these services to meet this need. And again, using RingCentral, and of course there's other great providers out there as well, but using our APIs, we're able to integrate into a single system where they had the SMS that could send the video meeting link to their patient, and the doctor could join through the team messaging solution. The patient could call back that same number, be connected to the doctor's office. And again, they're not going through one provider to another provider, all with a seamless solution, and all the data is there, so they can ensure compliance and regulatory compliance there as well. And the list goes on and on. Almost overnight, retailers had to find a way to stay in touch with their consumers, keep them updated as to whether they were open or not, get orders to them conveniently, and then manage these pickup orders with long queues. Again, using RingCentral's technology, using the APIs, be able to build applications where you had SMS chat notifications that said your order is ready to pick up, or you're number 3 in the queue. So again, a lot of great possibilities all available to us, but the reality is that, again, when you look at APIs, you're looking at them either to, again, drive efficiency within your company, you're looking to innovate and have a competitive advantage, or you're looking to future-proof. And right now, I think more than ever, it's absolutely critical, one, to have a provider that provides the APIs, and of course I'm biased, but two, to really adapt these APIs and start driving that innovation within your company. Now, I'd love to talk longer on this, and people tell me that I tend to talk all day. I won't do that to Jeremy and Kyle here. I would simply like to say that in terms of RingCentral's APIs, please feel free to check out our full offering at developers.ringcentral.com. We're very proud of that offering. And if you're curious about what companies are doing today and how they're really using the APIs and driving innovation and really taking this, 2020 challenge head on, we have our own developer conference happening October 20th, and it's free to join. So if you go to developers.ringcentral.com, we'd love to have you all join us for our developer conference as well. But with that, I'll turn it back to Kyle for, again, the continuation of this great event right here.